Thank you. Thank you. Welcome. My name is Craig Rainey. They call me the Renaissance Man. Welcome to my podcast. Let's see if we get started. Wow. I want to thank everybody out there for your support. Not just listening to the podcast, but wow, I have really moved a lot of books in the past month. I think 1,500 in paperback and ebooks in Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and I guess Canada or somewhere. I'm seeing some stuff that's international. Sometimes my metrics aren't complete as far as where things are going, but I really appreciate y'all reading it. The number one book of the 4 that I have written so far is Dark Motive, the second in the Carson Brand series. So y'all don't forget to read the first, the pilot novel, Stolen Valor. It's a good read. It talks about where the main character, Carson Brand, comes from and how he got into the situation he's in, that kind of thing. But again, thank you so much. And by the way, my website is craigrainey.com. Feel free to check it out. And my email is craig@craigrainey.com if you want to contact me and get some notes in on what I might want to talk about. And here in the future, I'm planning to have some guests on where we can talk about some things. Hopefully they'll be guests of note. I've had several people show interest, from well-known comedians to politicians. And anyway, so that's definitely not out of the question. We'll get that done. But again, thanks so much for for your support. It's nice being an author who is read. I've known so many authors in the past. In fact, the one that kind of inspired me, got me going, he was a author that had written 2 books, and he just had piles of them in his closet, no readership or anything else. And being an author is the smallest part of producing a book. I have learned over time that the business of publishing and promoting and marketing and positioning your product, that is way more time consuming than writing. And in fact, it's so much so that a lot of times I have very little time to actually write. That's a sad statement on my work habits, but it is what it is. And for you aspiring writers who maybe have stumbled upon this podcast and say, man, how did you sell 1,500 books last month? And well, we're going to cover a little bit of that today. This is a segment that's completely committed to the art of writing. Now, those of you who are not writers, you may still be fascinated by how a book goes together and what makes it interesting and what makes it not. And believe me, I've experienced both sides of that. Some of my reviewers just hate almost everything that I write, and some of them love everything I write. But I notice that some of my books have gotten a little better reception than others, and there's a reason for that. But anyway, we'll get into that. Today our topic is actually theme, and that's something that even I didn't know about until I read a couple books on the matter and wrote a few and thought, this makes sense to me. But y'all take a moment and click that like button right there at the bottom of your screen. I'm not a big reviewer or liker myself, but I could sure use a little bit of support on that. We're getting some good comments that are coming in, and I get the occasional email, but let me know you're out there. Hit a like button every now and then, and just say, hey, I'm here and I'm listening to you. I get the statistics on these podcasts, and we've got a decent listenership. It could be better. I'm no Joe Rogan, that's for sure. But I feel like the topics that I bring up, whether you agree or disagree, I think they're relevant. I think they're thought through, and I try to spend a little bit of time doing research and getting some facts together on it. Easy for me to say. But anyway, let me start this segment off by talking about probably the thing that most authors overlook in their writing. When you go to any kind of writing classes, and I've been to a few, they talk about character development. They talk about plot. They talk about subplot. The instructors also talk about, there's different formulaic ideas on how to put a book together and make it where it's readable. But the one thing that is often overlooked is theme, and that's the point of the podcast today is theme. What is theme? Theme is I call it the tone of the story. It's not that's not completely the definition for it because in a horror movie or horror book, the tone is dark and frightening. In a comedy, it's lighthearted, and obviously humorous. Well, if it's good, it is. Theme has to do with it's so hard to explain exactly what theme is. So let me give you an example of it. In the Carson Brand series, I became a more sophisticated writer. Believe me, I've got a long way to go. I'm not the best by any means. If I were the New York Times bestseller, you go, okay, well, this guy can speak to that. But let somebody who's a minor leaguer but has some insight. Let me give you a little bit of my insight. In the Carson Brand series, I've got 3 books. I've got Stolen Valor, Dark Motive, and the one that I'm about on page 100 of 36370 right now, Reasonable Sin. That's the 3rd book that's coming out, and I'm writing it. In fact, I was just writing it a few minutes ago and thought, I'm going to take a break and have a chat. So anyway, the theme in the Stolen Valor book was border crossings and how dangerous the cartels are in Mexico and how that impacts us in the U.S. Now, there's a difference between having a theme and letting it color your story and being preachy. I had a director that I worked with, did between 13 or 16 films with back when I was in the acting business. And he had the habit of having his characters jump on a soapbox and just go through this diatribe or a monologue of something political or social. I know one thing he discussed in this is the difference between, and I don't understand this, the difference between sarcasm and irony. They're 2 completely different things, but for some reason people seem to have it confused. And just real quick, the answer is this. Sarcasm is something that you say, and irony is something that happens to you. I'll go into it later, but I don't want to go. I don't want to go down a bunny trail in this thing. But so the theme on Stolen Valor was, the cartels and border crossings and how that affects us, and that kind of overlapped into the Dark Motive. But Dark Motive, the theme on that was, and the reason that I had a scout for a filmmaker saying, hey, write the script for this thing, and I like it, is because it was about human trafficking. There was a lot of that was in there, and so anyway, that was a big thing that went on there. But I didn't go into statistics and giving specifics and having the book depend upon a soapbox presentation of human trafficking and cartels and this kind of thing. What I wanted to do is just kind of color the story with that. And so Carson Brand, he found himself, because of his friend Bert, he found himself involved in this world, and it was quite foreign to him. Now, somebody who lives in Texas, and this character is from Texas. He's based here. He lives in San Antonio, and it really paints like, well, what happens in San Antonio that's great? Well, that's just the basis where it started. It's not a San Antonio-based story. But anyway, he finds himself, just by going over to Mexico, which I've been there many times myself, back before the cartels took hold, and even later. In fact, this story about him going into Piedras Negras over across from Eagle Pass, that's the descriptions there and everything are accurate because I was there. And anyway, so it's the cartels were still in control the last time I went. Or they were just starting to do that. But the point is that I didn't go on a soapbox about it. I didn't say, well, cartels are bad and they're bad people and this is what's going on, and and give a political viewpoint on it, because that's not what people want to see. This is not a nonfiction story. This is not a soapbox story. Theme colors your story. It gives some depth to the storyline. In this case, it was a backdrop. It was just a feature of the backdrop. I would compare it to, it was a cloud or 2 in the sky of the story, and that those clouds add a little bit of, instead of having a clear sky, it adds a little bit of contrast, a little bit of decoration to it, and that's what theme does. In Dark Motive, the theme was inspired a little bit. shouldn't say inspired, because I actually wrote this before the riots, and people call it other things, but the BLM Antifa riots that took place for 6 months in our inner cities. Well, I had already written the story, and it was in the final edit, and I was, the book was complete, and I was about to release it, and all of a sudden the George Floyd thing, and this just took off, and I remember sitting there saying to myself, "Man, they just took the theme to my story. They just took this whole thing," because that book was more about the political system and how it's used. The Bernie Sanders campaign, there was a guy that was working in his on his team that was talking about that they had which in Dark Motive, the candidate calls it the kinetic team on his campaign staff, and kinetic team as far as they went out, and they would do horrible things to people in at these campaign rallies. During the time that Trump was running in 2016, we heard all these stories about how these fights broke out at his rallies, and it turns out that BLM, Antifa, George Soros was sending people out. I don't have all the information on it. That's not the way I go, but that he was sending operatives in, and they were causing chaos and wreaking havoc, trying to ruin Trump's chances of becoming president. And then later on, what was learned was that these peaceful protests for the George Floyd killing, there were people in there that were showing up and raising the energy level and inciting these people to violence. And there were weapons that were brought in, Molotov cocktails and pipes and wrenches and hammers, and in some cases guns and everything. And these people were inciting these mobs to the next level. And if you know anything about the mentality of the mob psychology, a mob is a blind beast that's very easily manipulated and pushed and present. I did a lot of research on this, and anytime I write a book, I try to do as much research as I can on things, because it's not because I'm trying to be truthful, because it's fiction, and there's a suspension of disbelief aspect to any entertainment medium. I've seen some movies that really pushed it to the limit, but anyway, there's a suspension of disbelief that all readers invest in, and watchers of movies invest in the story, that as a writer, as a creator, you tap into, and you hope that you don't press that willingness to commit a suspension of disbelief on something. But anyway, Dark Motive was about that. It was about the politics. It was the inner workings. It wasn't about that. That was the tone, but the theme to it. The point of the story was that Carson Brand found himself in this situation where he met this guy, he got him into this campaign, and he said, it's just good money, it's easy, it's this and that. And anyway, but the theme of the story on that one colored the story. There was no position taken as far as, and BLM was never mentioned, by the way, because this story was written long before BLM. Well, we knew about it, but BLM was not out there, pushing these riots to a fever pitch. And Antifa was something that in North Carolina they'd gone against the skinheads, or something of this nature. And there was some talk about it, but they weren't front and center like they are today. Embassies are now flying BLM flags, and Antifa is lauded as an equity organization, and it wasn't that way when I wrote the book. But anyway, that was the theme. In the third one, Reasonable Sin, the theme, which is, it should be released, I would say I'll have it published and completed by the fall. I'm pretty far into it, and then I usually get through editing and pretty quickly. And if any of you follow me on social media, you've already seen that the book cover is already up, and it's designed and so forth. But anyway, that one has to do with big tech corporations, this kind of thing, and how their will is being exerted upon the population, upon employees and people who are consumers and this kind of thing. And again, I'm not beating the soapbox about this. It's just something that colors it. It adds a little realism to it. But that's theme. I think that theme and subplot are probably the two most important things in a story. The plot's good, and of course character development is good, but those two things, they really they really thicken the story. They really increase they increase the enjoyment of the reader's experience with the book. Uh, I've been watching the series Supernatural, and from what I hear, it's just taken off. And I enjoy it. My wife and I, we watch it quite a bit, and I think we've just binge watched. I think we're on season 14, maybe 3 episodes in, and it's well written. It's the characters are likable. There are themes to it. I noticed in chapter 14 that there are some anti-Trump remarks that are being made by some of the characters. They're talking about some of the some local political stuff. I think some celebrities and some stuff that they're mentioning that. I think that's a little overt. I think that they're using their platform. They're abusing that a little bit, and that's one of the things as an author I try not to do. I'm not going to abuse my reader by saying, okay, well, these are my socio-political views, and I'm going to push them on you, and I'm going to preach to you, and that's something that I actively avoid. I don't ever do that. That's something that I won't cross into that. But anyway, the point I was making about Subplot is if you watch Supernatural, and I'm not going to be a spoiler here, but I'll just tell you this. Okay, so Supernatural, the way it started off is it's a couple of guys that basically are taking on vampires and werewolves and ghosts and vengeful spirits and all this other kind of stuff, and then the occasional demon. And, after getting their butts whipped, they vanquish these things. Anyway, so the subplot throughout the whole thing was that the two brothers were of great interest to both heaven and hell. And that was the subplot. It kind of wound through there. But the plot itself was each episode, at the beginning, there was some hot little chick that was being, forgive my my term, but that's what it was. Got some hot little chick, scantily clad, very cute and everything, but was being victimized by some evildoer, literally. And the two, handsome brothers showed up and took care of it. And that was the plot. It's fun. It was light fare, but it was fun. And then the subplot was, okay, so we're starting, because of what they do, they're starting to get the attention of, the powers that be on both the dark side and the light side. And that was the subplot through the whole thing. It was a continuing storyline that just inserted itself. Usually in the last 3 to 5 minutes of the show, they would invest some time in that subplot and go, so what do you think's been happening on this, or this is what's happening, or something would happen to them which would indicate this. And anyway, so it grew. That subplot grew into where it was never a co-plot. It's very well written, by the way. I think that the writers knew exactly what they're doing, but it ballooned into a very big and very interesting subplot where you go, well, okay, demons are cool and everything, but this. But I noticed in season 14 that now they have switched places. The subplot is now the plot. The fight between heaven and hell for the people of Earth or the lack thereof. And then the subplot is, these people went out and they fought some demons, and we bring somebody back injured, and this is what happened. So that's how it changes. But anyway, so subplot and theme, those are the two important aspects of of story writing. If you really, as a writer, if you want to thicken your story up, if you want to add value to your story, find a theme. It's not something that is optional. It's mandatory. You have to have a theme for your book to be read and for it to be interesting. There are any number of examples that can be given to where a theme was applied to a book, and even if you didn't really notice it, it's there, and the more it is subtext, and the more that it is not even alluded to, but just that it's there on the periphery, it exists. That's really skillful writing when that happens, and the reader and the audience enjoys that. The other is the subplot. You've got your hero on his or her journey that's going from point A to point B, and the immortal mythos. If you Google that, if you don't know what it is, but the immortal mythos is the hero's journey. Where they're called, the rejection of the call, mentors, everything else. So finally, they take the call and prevail. But the hero's journey, that's the main plot. And with the main plot, you should always have a well-defined villain. And there is a format that I follow. The villain normally will appear about page 100 and then keep going from there. But again, the plot is good, but the plot becomes monolithic if you don't have subplot and theme. By the way, your subplot and your theme many times will color your character so that the character develops innately. For instance, with Carson Brand, they can talk about he's about 6 foot tall. He's in good shape for a guy who eats what he wants to and doesn't work out. He's thick in arms and legs from a life of labor, but this and that, da, da, da. He's got an innate toughness. That is the description of Carson Brand. But to get to know Carson Brand, the subplot has really defined him. In this case, he was being. I'm not going to go through the story. I almost gave it away. But the subplot defined him. But the theme colored him. The theme of the story, and he doesn't ever get involved in the theme. He is involved, but he doesn't have an opinion on the theme. In fact, I just wrote a portion of Reasonable Sin where he is directly confronted by the theme of the book, and he just rejects the entire conversation. And he does it for his own reasons. He doesn't do it to check out. He doesn't do it to make a statement that he disagrees. He rejects the conversation because it's irrelevant to him. He has bigger fish to fry. There are more important things in his world going on than this particular theme that's going on in this third book. So anyway, that's what I have to say about that. And I just thought I would throw a non-political, more of a, I call it an educational moment, but something that, you writers, I get, and let me just say this, what encouraged me to talk about this is I've had some correspondence from authors that are saying, hey, you've got 4 books out, you're working on your 5th, and you seem to, I'm starting to see you on the internet. I'm seeing that, you're appearing in Barnes & Noble, and my books are in Barnes & Nobles physically, which is great. I'm starting to, generate a following and generate a readership, and it's just been a lot of hard work. But the point is that these authors have asked me, well, how did you do it? What steps did you go through to get to the point where people are actually reading you? And these are 2 more tools in the toolbox, as they say so tritely. But anyway, appreciate you listening in. Bye.